Oh, no, you didn't. Wait a minute. No, you didn't. Hey, Jay! Hey! Jay! 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 Come back here!
Gangster rap
Jay!
is the marketing scheme
Fool-ass bitch made fun. Jay! I need my money!
for mass incarceration
Jay!
in order to breed mass incarceration of young black men.
Oh, you motherfuckers. Okay. All right. I'm putting cases on all you bitches. Huh? You think you can do this shit? Jay!
And then repair broken men.
Yeah, them niggas mimicking the street niggas. The kids mimicking the rappers are mimicking the street niggas.
It's better to raise strong children.
The kids mimicking the rappers.
Marketing scheme.
Rappers are mimicking the street niggas.
I'm putting cases on all you bitches. Huh? Jay!
That shit ain't jam. Them beats is jam. You niggas lyrics ain't jam. You ain't making no nigga go think.
Everything that gets you arrested
I need my
is
money!
popularized and glamorized in gangster rap music.
So in this case, is there a way for us to reclaim our hip hop culture? And if so, how?
It's better to raise strong children. We can reclaim
I need my
hip hop
money!
culture just as we can reclaim African soil, African resource.
Jay!
This is the purge. The question is the commitment and conviction there to take it back? Liberation will not be comfortable.
I need my money!
So at the end of the day, can we take it back? Of course. This is the purge. The white man has 2 eyes like us, 2 ears like us, 2 hands like us, 24 hours in a day like us. The issue is not so much can we overcome it. The issue is whether or not we have become so I'm gonna die for this with the life of luxury that the European has provided us with,
I need my money!
that we're no longer interested in the sacrifice necessary to take back what is ours. Liberation will not be comfortable. We're starting to think about getting ready.
I need my money!
The first thing I have to do is evaluate your readiness to change. Because if you're not ready to overcome, this is the purge. We might as well stop until you're ready, because I can't change you. So I gotta assess you. If you're not ready to change, this is the purge. We in the relationship. Liberation will not be comfortable. It's no need to talk about revolution with African people. I'm gonna die for if we're not ready to change. It's better to raise strong children. This is the purge.
I need my money!
If you're not, this is the purge, ready to change,
I'm putting cases on all you bitches.
we're starting to think about making a change. Are we there? Absolutely not.
Jay!
You cannot go from
I need my money!
a social, intellectual, political, and literal diet
I need my
of
money!
white supremacy
Jay!
to African revolution overnight. There's stages to get ready.
If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those movies, those yes unborn.
All power to the people, everybody. All power to the people. So hopefully just that intro helps to set the tone of what we're going to be talking about today. I do want to make it be known that the information that we will be going over, if you want a copy of it, drop your email in the chat and I'll make sure you get a copy of the document. I think it's important that we're able to take this information, go back, fuss with it, play with it, apply it to our daily lives. The whole point of us doing public political education for the community is so that the people are getting empowered. And with that being said, today's discussion in terms of the making of a slave society through this information, we're going to definitely dive into some different areas that a lot of y'all might not be familiar with. A lot of the information is taken from public sources, but the way we put things together within the Black Panther Party and the Panther Party, we like to get people to really see patterns. It is because once we see these patterns, we begin to really be able to digest just how deep oppression runs and suppression runs. And so with that, the way we're going to approach this class today is going to be on that level. And I'll remind y'all again as we get going to, if you want a copy of the document, you start liking what you hear and you need to digest it, know more about it, just drop your email in the chat and I'll make sure you get it. So let me share our screen and we get started here. Can everybody hear me okay? Make sure I'm not talking to myself. I got to start with that.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. All right, can y'all see this? Can we see the screen?
I see it.
Got it. All right. So I'm gonna start off with a quote by a guy named Philip Dick. The basic tool for the manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. Now that's important because basically when we talk about a reality or when we talk about being able to deal with and dissect what is real and what is not, what is information and what is not information, or deliberate disinformation or misinformation. The whole point is that there are certain key factors that we have to be able to realize that's taking place. And so this goes into how you control a society. So throughout this presentation, we'll be utilizing elements of the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, as well as a couple, maybe one or two of the 48 Laws of Power, interwoven with tools of waging disinformation war and the Willie Lynch letter. And I do want to start off by saying, regardless of, because that's going to be a class I give at some point, regardless of whether people agree with the essence, or should I say the origin of the Willie Lynch letter, we have to recognize that the tactics that are used are tactics that are definitely used on a society, and that is definitely in effect. So the whole point of when we go into and dive into the discussion today is to expose y'all to really the tactics that are being used. I'm not going to give too many examples. We will go into one that may be somewhat of a religious example, but for the most part, it's about absorbing the principles. The key is that you're able to, what you take away from this is being able to pierce through the principles of disinformation. And by piercing through the principles of disinformation, you don't have to memorize specific examples. What it does is it equips you with the ability to be able to see things as they're coming your way, real-time tactical warfare. And so that's what's important. So y'all work with me on this as we take this journey. So we're going to start with this here. Let me get this right. I always have a problem with these tools. Hold on. I'm trying to figure out how to work Adobe here. There we go. All right. Control the language, design the culture. And just the title itself lets you know what's going on. We must completely annihilate the mother tongue and institute a new language that involves a new life's work. You know, language is a particular institution. It leads to the heart of the people. The more a foreigner knows about language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of that society. Therefore, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to the extent is the country vulnerable to attack or invasion of a foreign culture. For example, if you take a slave and you teach him all about your language, he will know all of your secrets, and he is then no more a slave. For you can't fool him any longer, and being a fool is one of the basic ingredients of any incident to the maintenance of a slavery system. If you put a slave in a hog pen and train him to live there and incorporate in him the value it as a way of life completely, the biggest problem you will have out of him is that he will worry about the provisions to keep the hog pen clean. Now that's a powerful statement there, because what it's basically telling you that is when you misinform and you teach a culture, you teach a people, you teach a masses how not to be able to think freely, how not to be able to realize and recognize their power, how to suppress them through subcultures, how to suppress them through language, and by them not recognizing the true essence of how language is used on an everyday level, which we'll be covering, then what happens is you are able to manipulate them to the fullest extent. And this is not as simple as just simply talking about how in grade school we're taught English and we're taught everything in English, but it has to do with the essence of the words that we use and the realities that they shape and form and how we conduct ourselves based upon that. So let's go into this from position of warfare in order for that to make a little bit more sense. Humans are energy systems. All energy systems naturally share two things: consumption and production. In order to have an advantage over people, the position would be to offset this natural balance. But we must first acknowledge the awareness that the world and all of life operates within an ecosystem. This is key because as we get going in what we talk about, everything is building around natural law of ecosystems. When it comes to operating through warfare in an ecosystem, you're able to really harness and gain control over the people when they are not aware of this total overall connection we have. So this ecosystem under the control of humans in today's current state of affairs is an iteration of a battlefield. Once we can agree on this type of battlefield we operate from, then and only then can we set the foundation for clarity within a manipulated framework. And that is the key to how we move forward with this discussion, because the point being, everything that we're talking about is coming from the reference point of an ecosystem. One of the biggest things about warfare, and this is where a lot of us we don't see, is not so much the weapon itself, but the application of the weapon, or should we say the application of the tool that is used. Because there is a plethora of things in our environment, man-made or not, that can be weaponized and are weaponized against the masses, against the people, against individuals, for the sake of gaining control, for the sake of getting a desired result out of the people that are unaware of how this thing has been weaponized against them. So when we talk about an ecosystem, we're not talking about simply just looking at plants and animals and how they balance themselves out, but we have to look at this from a psychological approach, because then we can begin to see the bigger picture on how the concept of an eco is a weapon that is deployed and used against the people. And so when we talk about this, remember that we're talking about the ecosystem as a weaponization, and that being the battlefield that we're on. And knowing that the humans and all of life are basically operating through the energy system of consumption and production in order to generate, in order to replicate, in order to reproduce, in order to maintain. That in itself, once you are able to recognize and see something for what it is and reverse engineer a life cycle, a life system, if my goal at this point is now to use my knowledge of this against you and suppress your ability to be able to see you for what you are and everything around you for what it is, now I really got a way to control you. And within the Black Panther Party, we have an acronym that we use when we talk about just that, and it's called TOYS, which is tools of your surroundings. If you're not aware of the toys, if you're not aware of your surroundings and the tools of your surroundings, and don't utilize them for your empowerment, for your liberation, then by default, you allow your enemy to use these things against you. But everything that we don't take and utilize on the battlefield for our liberation is left on the battlefield for the opposition to do just that. And what we don't seem to realize is The first weapon that we tend to leave laying on the ground in the battlefield is our mind. And so that's what we're diving into tonight in terms of how that's possible. So the Black Panther Party teaches its members and the community to see the overlooked patterns in operation all around us by introducing what we call the trifactor. Some examples of the root trifactors we employ are what we call the 3Ds, which is define, develop, and defend, which is kinetically activated by the 3Ps. Perception, pursuing, and preservation. These form what we call our 3 cores of mechanism organization, which is continuity, battlefield, and life. And I get that, again, a lot of this may not necessarily connect the dots right away, but this is, again, why I say put your email in the chat and just start reading through this and applying it as much as possible to your day-to-day life, and it'll start connecting. The dots will start connecting. Now, on a brief note, again, within the Black Panther Party and the Panther Party, we talk about define, develop, and defend. If we're talking about disinformation, and we're talking about just information channels in general, it all starts with a definition. If I don't have a proper definition for what it is that I am, you know, the whole aspect of what creates me, if that definition was provided for me, we have to look at the source of what provided that definition to me in their end game, their methodology, the reason why it was introduced to me the way it was, and what is the end result of me carrying out that definition as I develop my life cycle, as I develop my being. And so therefore, based upon how I have developed myself, according to the definition that has been provided to me, will determine how I go about defending what it is that has defined me. And I will continue to develop the next generation, and that generation will pass on the same thing. So what we have to see here again is when we talk about that element of that particular trifactor, is that everything that embodies you, that makes you, tends to be passed on to the next iteration, the next line of your cycle. Your downline from a reproductive cycle, the next generation. Whether we realize it or not, whether we realize we're being fooled or not, what good, bad, or indifferent, we pass these traits on. So when we pass these things on to the next generation, and we're passing on information, or we're passing on levels of unawareness to the next generation, then they define themselves by that level of unawareness that we have developed, and then defended to our debt to raise them. And that's what's important, because again, the 3Ds are dealt with and activated and operated through what we call perception, pursuing, and preservation. How I perceive the world around me, which is what we'll be getting into and covering, is based on my definition of self, my definition of life, my definition of everything that creates my environment. According to my perception, how I go about developing my life will be operated through how I pursue the endeavors of what make me achieve, establish goals, establish value systems, establish a way of life. So how I pursue is based upon what I've been taught in terms of the development. And then that is coupled with the preservation. You defend what it is that you are. Based upon that, you will preserve that legacy and that lifestyle for the next generation, right, wrong, or indifferent. So whether we even are talking about weaponization, before we even get into the concept of weaponization, we have to realize that the patterns of a trifactor, the root trifactor patterns we're talking about, is define, develop, defend, perception, pursuing, and preservation. And once we get this and we see how this operates through an ecosystem, you are equipped, or starting to be equipped, with the proper tools to be able to learn and utilize principles, so that no matter what examples are thrown before you, no matter what things are thrown in front of you, you're able to see them for what they are. So that's why it's real important that we grasp things from the concept of the principles of what's going on. So again, these form the three core mechanisms, organizations, which is a continuity. Continuity in itself is basically how do you continue? How does that bloodline continue? How does that generation of people continue? How does the implementation of power or the implementation of oppression continue? What is the continuity? How do I maintain and keep things in place where they are? If I'm in a position of empower, if I'm in a position of dominance, I have to create a chain of continuity to make sure that that is always on point and always in the position that it's in. We talk about field corps, which is our basic operations of a general membership. In front of the field corps is a battle. When you go out in the field, when you go out into the world, you are on a battlefield. We have to realize that's what's happening. Because if we don't accept the fact that we are in a battle all the time with everything that is going on, then we let our guard down and we are easily influenced by things that are literally designed to manipulate and change you and control your perception day in and day out, especially when we operate through television, the news, the media, social media, all of that. You're constantly being bombarded with not only just the influences themselves on the channels that you decide to watch, but the commercials you decide to watch. The music that is being interjected in these commercials, hidden, that are carrying the certain words through certain frequencies based upon that musical rhythm that is put together. All of these things are meant to take your guard down and create a certain perception within you. Whether you act upon it right then or not, or whether you act upon a certain percentage of it, we have to realize that we are on a battlefield, and the whole end game of whoever created that, who's ever providing that intent, that content is meant to influence you. They're meant to sway your decision-making power from one thing to another thing. That is a battlefield, people. And that is all designed to deal with what we call life. So we have to be able to see how these sets of threes all come together and form a certain chain of principles that we can carry out to either be manipulated by if we don't realize what's happening, or to be able to counter the manipulation that is going on. Anybody got any questions before I continue? Because I know some of this may be a little, I may be going on and on. Y'all still with me?
Yeah, we're with you.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. So when we address these three sets of threes spring forth what we call three neurolinguistic patterns for identity and to separate what we call trick knowledge used against our critical consciousness. Now, keep in mind, people, oftentimes most of us refer to critical thinking, but we don't refer to critical consciousness. It is the next step up. Critical consciousness goes into how we see the entire world again through the lens of where we are, who we are, why we are, when we are, and what we are, based upon that trifactor ecosystem itself. So the individual, the family, and the community, we can look at it from that point of view. So from that position, our critical consciousness is dealt with through what we call these three elements of a trifactor: symptoms from a problem, description versus an explanation, and answer instead of a solution. When we go about dealing with critical consciousness, when we go about evaluating everything that is going on within our life, all of the decisions that we come to based upon either operating through choice or operating through options, because there is a difference in that. Most people think that they're making a choice when in fact they are simply choosing the best quote unquote option that has been provided to them, because they have been boxed in terms of their social construct and awareness of what it means to be engaging in social engineering. So therefore, critical thinking is not even at that level. We're still talking about a basic concept of what it means to do to deal with critical consciousness is not at that level. We're still talking about now the basic element of critical thinking. being able to realize that you are actually only dealing with a symptom, not the real problem. You have been given a description. When you ask Siri or these other social media things for what does this mean, and it gives you something, it is typically giving you a description. When you run with that description without being able to embody the content of what has been told to you, then that information, that data that you've been provided, unless you can apply that to a position of empowerment, it is in fact being able to change your perception to the point of being able to control you to a certain degree, which is why we must always be able to go into something with an explanation. If you get an answer is not a solution, people. These two words are interchanged all the time, and that's what we're going to also dive into, which is part of the problem. When I define for you and I allow your definition of something to be warped and I allow your language to be manipulated and controlled, and we're not talking about just what language we talk in, okay? Keep that in mind. This is deeper than that, because when you simply think that because you are talking or speaking someone's dialect or tongue, if you don't really understand and overstand the essence of how those words construct the actual symbolic character, content, and relationship with everything that goes on behind that word that leads to the next word, which leads to what we call a period, which is a end result, then what happens is you are simply emulating a process. That emulation will not free you from oppression. That emulation will not gain you the ability to be able to not be manipulated simply by the spell casting that is happening when you say these words or when you form a sentence. So we have to really dive into and recognize that giving you an answer is not the same as giving you a solution. If I create a population of people who substitute solution for an answer, and they begin to develop their life that way, going into what we call the life cycle. If you operate on the battlefield and you operate through your continuity, through a misinformation, a disinformation as a way of life, the older you get, the more you practice the answer as opposed to the solution, the easier it is for you to make sure that you are not able to see a higher level of consciousness in terms of being critical about what's really going on, so that you really understand what neurolinguistic patterns are. So let me keep going on. And as we get early, as stated regarding a battlefield, the first thing we must accept is being in a war zone. Our battlefield trauma is the clinically defined condition. This has been referred to as post-traumatic slave syndrome. Most of y'all have heard of that. But it is not until our people know how to see into the patterns of battlefield perception will we be able to understand the requirements of engagement in this warfare. We are not we are not to dwell in a place of victimization and soak in blood of being the oppressed. Okay, so I'm not doing that. But by identifying the state of our condition, we are able to call it out and move to the actions required to transform our life. And that is the point. So unlike some of the things you may hear with influencers on the YouTube about saying, hey, this thing is being done to you, this thing is being done to you, they're describing to you. But are they giving you an explanation? See, we have to realize the difference. There is a difference between a symptom than a problem. There is a difference between a description and an explanation. There is a difference between an answer and a solution, people. We have to see that, and we have to accept being in a war zone and at battle in order to align our mental capacity to the point to where we have our guard up and we have the right energy to see an attack coming our way. Point number one, San Diego 10-point platform. We are gaining freedom. We promote the power of practicing self-determination, determining the destiny of our communities, and defining the Black nation. See, with that being said, and plenty of people that are not members of any formation of Panthers recognize and know the platform. But there are certain things about the platform that we talk about, the principles, the ingestion of the information to the point to where you're able to embody it, which is why we say we're gaining freedom as opposed to saying we want freedom. Most of y'all are familiar when you think about the 10-point platform. Number one, we want freedom. I'm simply calling what I want. But the words I use and how I choose to say those words, if I'm simply wanting something, then all I'm doing at that point is calling it out. But by calling it out through a definition, by wanting something that I really don't understand, what is my perception? How will I go about pursuing it? How will I develop something that I can't perceive properly? How will I develop the drive to be able to defend something and then therefore pass on the right elements to the next downline? So realize that. So we have to promote the power of practicing self-determination. We can't simply say we want freedom. We can't simply say we would like to practice or want the right to practice self-determination. We have to say we promote the power of practicing self-determination, which is the whole point of any Panther formation providing political education classes to the public, is because the people, the power is in the people. The people must be able to see that they have that power. And by operating through that position, now you are practicing self-determination. You are dealing with promoting the power, which again ties back into your pursuit, right? So let me keep moving here. Again, for those that may be jumping on, if you want a copy of this document, just put your email in the chat and I'll make sure we get it to you as soon as possible. So in order to extract the framework used against our critical consciousness, we will introduce some more trifactors, what we call 3 pillars of perception and 3 pillars of perspective. And we're going to start with the 3 pillars of perception. First being truth, fact, and reality. Now, when we deal with this, we have to go into these 3 concepts of perception. And again, like I said, we'll be talking about in using certain principles introduced through Robert Greene, the 33 Strategies of War, and this is one of them here. Weave a seamless blend of fact and fiction, misperception. Make it hard for your enemy to know what is going on around them. Feed their expectations, manufacture a reality to match their desires, and they will fool themselves. Control people's perception of reality, and you control them. Right there, it's telling you that. So then this goes into what is a truth. So what is truth? Truth are those things that are not simply acknowledged, but must be discovered or created. If I say God exists, and I propose a strong reasoning for that affirmation, or for the affirmative of that statement, then God really does exist. That is my reality, which now we have to talk about what we call suspension of disbelief. The intentional avoidance of skepticism, critical thinking, or logic. This is often the route most associated with being a good at coping with a specific situation. After the repeated pattern of acceptance of avoiding due to living with a conditional obstacle, let me go into that. A conditional obstacle is basically when you are constantly bombarded or constantly being driven or having to deal with a specific obstacle all the time. You create what we call a conditional obstacle. That conditional obstacle basically causes you to be able to deal with being good at coping as opposed to addressing this from the situation of a solution or a real problem as opposed to actually dealing with the symptom. So a person can conveniently choose to never confront a reality that removal of oppression is the logical or desired path. So when we talk about truth, let's look at this picture here. The person on the right, is that ball blue or is it red? they're going to say the ball is blue. The person on the left is going to say the ball is red. Both of them are speaking their truths. Both of them are right from their perception, from their point of view. When you talk about an overseer, we have to use the proper words. Talk about an overseer, or you talk about those people that are in positions of power that have the ability to reach out and grasp and gain more resources than you, as well as more knowledge and practical use of that knowledge than you. They have the ability to see what we call the lower aspect of what's going on and the higher aspect of what's going on, which goes into the concept of as above, so below. But that's a whole nother different discussion. But what you have to realize is if my knowledge, my use of knowledge, my use of my environment, my toys, gives me the advantage of being able to see that the ball is actually red and blue, but also hold you confined to a linear path of awareness, a linear path of learning. And this is key. When my path of learning and my process of learning and digesting things is linear, that means I am stuck within a pattern construct. By being stuck within a pattern construct, then I am only going to be able to perceive so much of the actual picture of what's going on. At any given point anyway, we're all limited by our perceptions. But again, the point being, when we talk about ecosystem warfare, ecosystem suppression and oppression of the population, the idea here is to take that advantage of your perception, your limited perception, and use it to control you. Therefore, if we equate that to a martial science system, a martial arts system, this basically means I'm able to, at this point, apply what we call borrowed energy. By applying borrowed energy, I am using very little of my own effort to be able to manipulate and control you, simply based upon the angle of interjection that I apply this weapon to you, across you on the battlefield. That is why we have to see things for what they are in terms of being on a battlefield. Because if we step over something that we think has no value, doesn't serve me in any capacity, can't serve me in any capacity, but yet someone behind me is able to turn around and see that stick as a bat and bop me over the head with it, then whose fault is it at that point? So I'm going to leave you with that note on that point. Let's keep moving. God is good. Is that a truth, fact, or reality? To answer this question, you must first agree on language, definition, and point of view / reference. And my goal here, let me say this, is not to offend anybody's specific religion or any religion in general. I'm using this because religion from that standpoint is something that we typically form our foundation on. So it is great to be able to dissect just our perception of what something is in order to go into just how much we are being able to be manipulated on other levels. So language / culture would ask, what is God? What is a God? Is God the same thing as the God? So now when we talk about this, what we're doing is we're going into the different types of analysis. But what this is done through what we call language, definition, and point of view / reference. So we first have to see it for what it is. We have to step back from our feelings and see that for what it is in order to be able to go into it any further, which takes us to another point of the 33 strategies of war. Declare war on your enemies, which we call polarity. This is real important, people, because when we talk about politics in particular, polarity is always used to control the puppet. And in case any of y'all hadn't seen, the image in the very background is a puppet master with a left and a right, creating a polarity. You cannot fight effectively unless you can identify them, learn to smoke them out, then inwardly declare war. Your enemies can fill you with purpose and direction, period. You cannot effectively fight something that you cannot identify with or you cannot identify. The bottom line, that is a classic example of what we're getting at. When we know that things are not right with our society, things are not right with our government, things are not right with the way we are having to live. We can see that, we can feel that, we get that. Something's wrong, something needs to be done. But if we can't identify all of the layers of how we are being attacked, where we are within the realm of the fights, where we are within the combat zone, then you are in a position to where you cannot really fight an enemy. That enemy is invisible. The symptoms of what is being done to you are not invisible, but the actual problem can hide itself in plain sight if you are not key on how to have and develop your critical consciousness and be able to see the patterns of oppression through the trifactor format. If you can't see that, then you will experience the symptoms all day long. Yeah, it hurts. Something's wrong. I can see that. But you will not be able to separate a problem from the symptom. And therefore, as long as you're going after the symptom, but not being able to actually identify what a problem is, your enemy will remain hidden from your counterattack. In Western cultures, the argument tends to be monotheism versus polytheism, which leads to the polarization of thought with the intention of forcing a side to be chosen and the complete rejection of the other side. Remember, for those who can peep that knowledge, the keys to winning this battle is to remove you from the awareness of eco-synthesis process of warfare. Bottom line, if I can take you off the game of the recognition that you are at war, if I can suppress the ability to be able to see language for what it is, which will create a proper definition for you to work from and give you a vantage viewpoint and a proper point of reference. As long as I can suppress all of this, you will not be able to identify me and attack me. You can deal with the symptoms all day long, but you can't attack me. So let's remember that as we move on. And I open the floor for any questions as we go to the next slide. But there are many versions. A few are listed below. Monotheism. Y'all can, again, if y'all want to copy this, read put your email in the chat and I'll send it to you. But there's no deeper insight on these different ones. It's just the fact that I wanted to throw these out there because, again, a lot of us in the Western culture are not aware of anything of the monotheism and polytheism. A lot of times we don't realize that there's more to it than just that when we go into the definition of viewpoints of religion or different aspects of spirituality. So I wanted to make sure that we have these definitions to work from. Because again, my end game, if I'm manipulating a population, the end game is to create you, to get you stuck in what we call a polarity. If I can get you stuck in a polarity, then you operate from extremes. Operating from those extremes gets you into what we call binary language and binary code. Remember, computer systems, in case y'all don't know this, computer systems operate through binary code. Everything that we see is a translation of ones and zeros, on, off, yes, and no's. It is not until you get into quantum computing that you really dive into what is now beginning to be what we call artificial, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial reality and everything that goes into redefining and recodifying an actual reality outside of the carbon-based reality that we have constructed through our senses, dating back to the development of our physical lives as human beings or as a human race. But now when we start getting into quantum computing, we move into string theory, which takes you into a deeper level to where things can be on and off at the same time, where a reality is now opening up what we call multiverse. And a lot of people may have seen things on Marvel Universe, X-Men or whatever, or the different quote unquote superhero characters. But people, if you do your little research, you'll find out that the concept of a multiverse is real. You'll find out that the concept that talks about that goes into that is string theory. String theory actually dives into what is necessary in order to create quantum computing, which allows things to be wherever the perception and the reality of the user needs it to be at that moment in time. If you have two users, you will have two positions of reality. Going back to what is a truth? This is powerful, people, because as a AI, as the should we say the architect, overseer, the architect, both sides, the ones and the zeros, the red and the blues, are making decisions. By me operating through this string theory concept, I am able to make the decision both of the time and it be right all of the time. I'm able to compute on the left and on the right at the same time simultaneously. I am no longer caught within the void of what we call binary operation. And that is, and maybe I seem a little excited because I really see the power and the danger of where that's taking us. And I urge y'all to do a little bit of study for those of y'all that may not know what I'm talking about on just that concept. And the thing about that is that, again, now when we take this back to the nature of this document that we're going over now, dealing with ecosynthesis in terms of the process of warfare, the deal is when we look at this from a psychological aspect or a physical operation aspect, and we see the weaponization as it applies to the psychological things that can be employed using the same thing that we use within physics on that level that create that multiverse reality. We're now talking about from a process of how we view our world and how you manipulate and control the population. The same exact tools of a reality, the same exact tools can be used. So whereas we started and dealt with language and culture, now we have to go into the definition. A definition will determine who is God. Point of reference will defend why God matters. Once these parameters are in place, then the answer can be made. Keyword, people, this is your introduction to how manipulation works. By made, we are basically stating a working standard of reality can be established for general use. Also, we must recognize that an agreed answer is not the same as a fact. So here we're dealing with what we call a made reality, a made condition, a made substance. When we talk about continuity, we go into what we call replication. Let's just keep it on a basic level. Two people get together, they have sex, they reproduce, and they create a child. The same concept from a synthesized level as it applies to a thought that I want to reproduce in your mind, so that what we call I'm sorry, I'm stumbling on my words here, but a product comes from the fact that we have a effect. So going into creating an effect, when I'm dealing with made here, I got an action and I got a reaction. So that action interjects through this carrier wave, and it makes something within your framework of your mind in terms of how your consciousness and how you think. And as a result, you're going to have a reaction from that. Too often, what we're not seeing, and this is why I say we have to study this from the principle aspect, is that we think we're not influenced by something simply because we may not have went out and bought that specific product. But you are being channeled into the whole framework of consumption as opposed to production. Whenever we live our lives, whether we're talking about personal, family, or community, to the point to where we are not producers, we're not creative, we're not actually making things, we're not actually giving back to the environment in terms of our life cycle of what we are, and the only way we're giving back is the natural process of physical ecosystem, which means you eat something, and it comes out the other end, if that's the only time we make something is a turd as an end result product, then you are being oppressed. You have been suppressed in terms of your delivery to be able to empower yourself, fight oppression, in oppression, and gain the ability to be able to be self-determined and address it from that level. And that's the point. We have to be able to realize how we are being manipulated and what battlefield we are operating from. That's the key. There are multiple different battlefield fronts. We're simply talking right now about the perception. We're talking about psychology and how something can psychologically be used against you, which goes into the title of the discussion, making a slave population. Next point, using dead tales of grandeur. This type of disinfo trait is to live under the image of a high caliber deceased individual to play on the emotions and trust of the target. As an example, we can refer to the phrase, what would Jesus do? By dropping phrases and projecting false examples of works and choices that the deceased would direct, the disinformationalist will lead the target into a direction by stripping them of any resistance out of honor to the wishes and respects of the deceased. If a challenge is given, the target would be made to feel guilty for questioning the greatness of the choices of the deceased and led into thinking the decision had nothing to do with them and that they are merely acting on behalf of the deceased. The weaponization of fear continues to work over and over against a civilized population. And let me break that down. It says, when somebody in the chat says, what does that mean? Let me give you an example of what that means. A person can basically just say, well, such and such, when he was alive, this is how he would go about basically teaching a population. You'll take a great person, just say Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, or whoever you like to look at as somebody of power in terms of someone that has transitioned to the ancestors. And a person that is wanting to manipulate a people would say, well, Malcolm X once did this. Brother, why would you think you were any different or you any better? Now, what I'm doing is I'm using someone who is deceased as a reference point to make a statement or to interject my way of thinking or my process of doing something and misleading you into thinking that this person would have responded the same way. But there's no true way of knowing how someone is going to respond that is deceased upon something now, based upon the fact that they are not now. They are not here now. And not only that, the whole intent of doing so is meant to bait you into the fact that by challenging my way of explaining and expressing what needs to get done or how you go about doing it, by hiding it behind someone of a higher stature, of a person of respect or certain of admiration that we both agree on, is simply meant to disarm you. And the whole point of disarming you is so that whatever my intent is in terms of providing this information to get a certain response from you, your guard is now down so that I can do just that. I could really care less about what that person would do. I could care less about what Jesus would do. I'm only using the name Jesus because I know that resonates with you. I know that character resonates with your emulation of how you want to conduct your life. So I am weaponizing a figure from the past for the sake of controlling your future. And so when we see this pattern and we see it for what it is, people, we realize that we are being played. We realize that we are being disarmed on the battlefield. So I hope that explains it to you, comrade. And we can use any example, but I just wanted to throw that one out there. Again, not trying to step on any toes. Channel of disinformation. Manufacture a new truth. Create your own experts, groups, authors, leaders, or influence existing ones willing to forge new ground via scientific investigation or social research or testimony which concludes favorably. In this way, if you must actually address issues, you can do so authoritatively, which basically means I can inundate you with things that are all based upon what findings I want to bring to the table. And that is called manufacturing a new truth. And by doing so, it disarms you to the point to where you will accept that viewpoint. You will accept that information. You will accept that as a fact. Quote here: as long as the mind is enslaved, the body can never be free. Psychological freedom and a firm sense of self-esteem is the most powerful weapon against a long night of physical slavery. And the reason why I threw that out there is because when we talk about the concepts that were used in Willie Lynch, we have to realize that it is not required anymore for the United States to operate on certain levels of physical slavery in terms of chains, physical chains, because the mind has been enslaved now. When we talk about the masses of our people, when we talk about fascism, when we talk about imperialism operating the way it does, when we talk about a 2% of the population controlling over 95% of the wealth of the entire world, I no longer have to physically enslave you because your mind is where it needs to be. And we have to see that. All right, before I move on real quick, anybody got any questions or before we move on, or want to make any thoughts? Y'all still with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. This is good information. When you touched on religion, that is really powerful within our organization as such, because we do have people that have different beliefs. So therefore, when you were saying that, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, keeping that conversation of religion respectful, what are some pointers on, some things that you can say to your comrades? Because oftentimes you will have some people who study Christianity that want to pray, and you have some people who could be Muslim. You have some people who study spirituality and so on and so forth. How would that be addressed?
First and foremost, I would say, when you're coming from a diverse background, like within the Panther organization itself, we are people of all religious backgrounds. You let on to the fact that from a psychological, which is why I'm sticking to this from the standpoint of psychology, when we talk about how our language is weaponized against us, when we go into the 10-point platform and we talk about when you say giving people a true knowledge of self, and we talk about knowledge of self, then you can kind of at that point go back and say, well, now we can talk about, in that standpoint, we can go into the isms. The isms go into the fact that what we want to talk about is liberation theology. Liberation theology goes into the fact that if your spiritual root is not speaking directly to your cultural understanding, then you are operating from a position, to whatever degree, because there's various degrees that all of us are operating from in terms of being oppressed as it applies to mental, physical, and spiritual trifactors anyway. But when you expose people to the level, to as much as possible, to the level of oppression or the level of misinformation or the level of misdirection that they're on, by giving them a way to phrase and stand back and reflect on their inner self, then you open that door up. So basically, I would say this: instead of us attacking someone's religion or even directly exposing them to an inundative level of historical knowledge that would prove that the path that they own is wrong, how about just dropping certain jewels and asking them to go back and reflect on yourself, reflect on your community, reflect on your family, And make sure as you are operating within that you are able to find ways to utilize your physical, mental, and spiritual to empower you, empower your family, and empower the community. As we do that and we move in those channels, the fat starts trimming out as we get older. As long as we are applying these principles, we will naturally start elevating and naturally start moving away from certain levels or layers of oppression within these religious constructs. Anyway, but everybody is operating on a different level. So the problem is we have to speak as much as possible in a broad tone and then narrow things down to the individual when those opportunities arise. But we don't jump in creating a situation where I'm gonna throw my guard up and not even hear the truth or the facts of where you're going. Remember, we talked about truth because that truth forms that reality, right? And based upon that, that's where we go. I can hit you with a fact, and that fact will shatter your truth. That fact may shatter your reality. If I yank the rug from up under you, if I yank your foundation from up under you, I better be willing to replace it with another foundation. And that's part of the problem that we run into and we face. As a people, we have to realize that it's not about simply removing or yanking a false foundation up from up under somebody unless I have something to replace it with. Because if I'm not ready to replace that institution of lies with an institution of wisdom, an institution of facts, an institution of development, of freedom, of liberation, then what I'm doing is I'm setting them on a paradoxical course of a even harder crash and burn. And that is one of the things that when we get into this, we often find ourselves fussing with simply because we've been introduced to new information and we can't wait to go out and share it with somebody. We can't wait to open somebody else's eyes. But when we do so, we have to make sure we have something to land on, people, all across the board, something to land on. And yes, that is a tough one, but it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, but that's how we have to think. Because when we talk about freeing ourselves, when we talk about liberating a community, liberating a society, it's like I want to give this example. And again, don't mean to crunch anybody's toes or start up a whole nother conversation. But let's just use the one about defunding the police. Let's just say tomorrow, bam, no more police. Have we created an institution, a foundation that can deal with all of the iteration of BS that go along with what imperialism has created based upon the generations of development that the slave catcher went through to create the current version of the slave catcher being the police on that lowest level. When you yank that system of oppression away, but you don't replace it with a system of liberation that also matches the level of power that has been implemented by that puppet master, then what you're going to do is send your people into a more state of frenzy and chaos simply because they don't know how to handle their newfound freedom. Because that newfound freedom also means there is a equal, even more level of a newfound obligation, a newfound responsibility. Because now you don't pick up the phone and dial 911 and somebody comes to your aid. Now, if someone is breaking into my house, I have to use a gun to defend myself. You should do that anyway. But the point being, you don't just say, halt, go away, or you don't just say, I'm going to hold you at bay until the police get here so that they can lock you up so that you don't break into somebody else's house. Now you are the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It gets deep. And that's just a simple example. We could talk about somebody dying on a highway accident, and nobody willing to stop, and that body keeps getting ran over because everybody's busy. They want to go where they want to go. You don't have that police darting in and out, stopping the traffic so the ambulance can get over there and aid that person that has been rendered, you know, in a wreck or whatever. Y'all get my point. There are certain levels of things that we don't think about when we say one thing. Keep in mind this. Let's look at it from this, and I'm gonna keep moving on. The deal is we have to match power with power at every level. Power only respects power. The same thing that we're doing now when we expose these principles of oppression. The point being, unless I am able to implement my own levels of power, I am still no threat to that enemy. So we have to build institutions of power. This is why the ecosystem that we talked about of warfare works so well in any way, because we're 90%, 95% consumers. Remember, if 2% of the population owns over 95% of the wealth, that means 95% of the population only has 2% of the resources to use to fight against the 2% that has 95%. So we have to use our people power. We have to use what we do have as a weapon to be able to deal with them. But you can't match power with power unless you are matching power with power. You see? So when we want to defund the police, we have to erect a system of accountability within our community that can address all of the different variations of responsibilities that department had, which ties into also a communication system to where I can alert and get a rapid response team to come in and address whatever level of operation there is. So is this same thing applies to physical, mental, and spiritual warfare. When we talk about matching power with power, we have to look at it from that level. This is why we say we must practice self-determination, because you don't just all of a sudden go from being a slave to being free. We have to work ourselves in that position, and it starts with the way we think. But as long as we're locked in a mental slavery, all of the methodologies that we're talking about in terms of freeing ourselves will never come to fruition. So what is a fact? A fact is a reality that cannot be logically disputed or rejected. Facts are concrete realities that no amount of reasoning will change. When one acknowledges a fact, they are doing just that. Facts are not discovered. Facts are not created. Facts are simply acknowledged. But here goes the kicker. But from a position of the observer in making judgments, which we just talked about, facts can appear to be objective if used to form a comparative. An example would be the sun is hot. And then let me go into that example even further. From the stance of where we are as flesh and blood operating on what we call moderate temperatures, yes, the sun is hot. But if you take our sun and you deal with comparative examples, and you put that against a hotter sun could potentially burn up and evaporate our sun. So is it hot? Is the sun hot? Depends on how far you want to go down that argument and down that path. But the point being, if I want to disarm you, and this is the key here, disarm you of your facts, I have to help to generate a new reality. I have to do something to offset your chain of thought, your chain of logic, which is why it is very key and very important that we realize the difference between linear thinking and non-linear thinking. So I want to make sure folks are aware of that. We cannot be linear thinkers. We have to be non-linear thinkers in order for these things to make sense and to be able to have application for higher thought. Now, the channel of disinformation: ignore proof presented, demand impossible proofs. This is perhaps a variant of the play dumb rule. Regardless of what material may be presented by an opponent in public forums, claim that the material irrelevant and demand proof that is impossible for the opponent to come by. It may exist, but not at his disposal. or that it may be something which is known to be safely destroyed or withheld, such as a murder weapon. In order to completely avoid discussing the issue, it may be required that you categorically deny and be critical of media or books as valid sources. Deny that witness are acceptable, or even deny the statements made by government or other authorities that have any means or relevance. So the whole point is being able to disarm you from your solid position of awareness. And that's the whole point. So in order to do that, you banish evidence and witness. If it does not exist, it is not a fact, and you won't have to address the issue. Again, that goes into the aspect of a problem and a symptom as it applies to that. If I am dealing with an enemy and I can't prove that enemy exists, or I cannot prove that that person did this, or that body or that institution did this, I may know it's happening because I'm getting hit with the symptoms all day long. But if I can't prove it because I don't have my tangible quote unquote evidence and stuff that I can bring to the table, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. False evidence. Whenever possible, introduce new facts or clues designed and manufactured to conflict with the opponent's presentation as useful tools of neutralize sensitive issues or impede resolutions. This works best when the crime was designated with contingencies for the purpose and the facts cannot be easily separated from the fabrications. So from that standpoint, I can dismiss the entire thing because some of it is false. If you're lying about this, maybe you're lying about that. And if you're lying about that or this was fabricated, now I'm getting into that polarity. Now I can just dismiss the whole thing. You see, that's the whole point of baiting truth within falsehoods as well. When you sway people according to their emotional stumbling blocks or their emotional obstacles, I lend you to start believing everything that I have because you agree with me emotionally. You agree or want to agree. You want to believe what I have to provide for you. And by doing that, it is that much more easier to manipulate you because you want to believe it anyway. And so therefore fabrications of truths or facts can come into play. What is reality? The world or the state of things as it actually exists. Existence that is absolute, self-sufficient, or objective, and not subject to human decisions or conventions. Perception is not reality, but admittedly, perception can become a person's reality. This is why it is important to view from the framework of an ecosystem warfare. If we allow ourselves to place reality on the individual, then it unlocks the illusion of perception and sends us back into the matrix, which is great for this backdrop. What is real? If you define, how do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste, see, then reality is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Powerful statement by a fictional character. Channel of disinformation, invoke authority, claim for yourself or associate yourself with authority and present your argument with enough jargon and munita to illustrate you are one who knows and simply says it isn't so without discussing issues or demonstrating correctly why or citing sources. Again, invoking authority. This goes back to power, respect, and power operating from a position of authority and power, which is why they use what we call a straw man. Find or create a seeming element of your opponent's argument, which you can easily knock down and make yourself look good and the opponent look bad. Either make up an issue you may safely imply exists based on your interpretation of the opponent, arguments or situation, or select the weakest aspect of the weakest charges, amplify their significance and destroy them in a way that appears to debunk all the charges real and fabricated alike, while actually avoiding discussion the real issue. And this again is used in politics all day long. When we allow ourselves to be swayed through public opinion by our emotions about a personality as opposed to the actual quote unquote thing that this politician is supposed to be standing for, that's going to be something that's going to change, or change that's going to be implemented that affects the people at large. Now we talk about the three pillars of perspective: symptom, problem, solution. We have to start with knowing your enemy, which is intelligence. As I say that real quick, I want to bring everybody to the CIA FBI operation called counterintelligence. Most people say that word, COINTEL, and it just flows right off their tongue without them really understanding what they're saying. The idea here is to counter your intelligence. There is an alternate program in a deeper level, that same program called counter consciousness, that most people don't recognize. MK Ultra was a counter consciousness operation ran on the people. So, as a tool or a weapon placed against the population, the idea is to affect your intelligence. So I want to counter your intelligence. The target of your strategies is not the army you face, but the mind who runs it. Learn to read people. Period. Control the dynamic, forcing. Instead of trying to dominate the other side's every move, work to define the nature of the relationship itself. Control your opponent's mind, pushing emotional buttons and compelling them to make mistakes. Right here, we started off talking about the 3Ds: define, develop, and defend. Work to define the nature of the relationship. When you are able to deal with the nature of the relationship, which again, ecosystem warfare. When we're dealing with that and we're able to see how we're able to separate the parts from the whole, and we use the parts against themselves, that's called controlling the dynamic. And when we're able to control the dynamic through counterintelligence, by countering their ability to be intelligent, you create a perpetual cycle to where the people will preserve that dumbed down version of themselves for the very next generation to do the same thing. That generation will then improve upon the dumbing down of its generational wealth and its generational knowledge to the next generation, which will then improve the dumbing down of itself. We continue a constant cycle. And all along, the true enemy, which is not identifiable at this point, is able to use borrowed energy because we are doing the work for them. This is where the concept of the Willie Lynch syndrome and Willie Lynch principles come into place, because so much of the work is now in perpetual motion, now being done by the population against itself, that very little effort needs to happen from me. All I need to do is keep greasing the wheel, maintaining that operation. You see, all because we don't see what's right in front of us. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. So what you are not able to think, you become. What is a symptom? Symptoms are indicators or manifestations of the underlying issue. They are observable and measurable effects that point to a problem's existence. Symptoms can be physical, emotional, behavioral, or even systematic in nature. They often serve as warning signs or signals that prompt further investigation to uncover the root cause. Addressing symptoms will provide only temporary relief, aka suppressant. Simple as that. But we can observe and measure symptoms. This is why when people understand and overstand warfare at the level of the 2%, at the level that they operate on, whatever names they want to go by, without me getting into that, the deal is, because I have created a system of oppression. I have created an institution of oppression. I've created a society that is operating on this playing field, in that motion, in that laboratory, in that experience, in that warehouse, in that means of production that I have designed. That's the key. I've created a production system that is going to be consumed by the population. The population constantly consumes what it is I have to offer. What am I offering? Debt. What am I offering? Destruction. What am I offering? Fake money. What am I offering? Fake resources. What am I offering? A virtual reality, not a real reality. What am I offering? You see, and you're constantly taking it in because it's 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And that's what happens to us. So we get stuck in a cycle of symptoms. So therefore, when you go to the grocery store and you got a cold and you call it medicine, it's really suppressing. Just wanted to throw that out there. This is maintained through what we call an Alice in Wonderland logic. Avoid discussing the root issues by reasoning backwards or with an apparent deductive logic which forbears any actual material fact. Use one symptom to address another symptom. This is when you take one medication and then you have to take another medication because of the symptoms of that medication, which the initial medication ain't actually curing you. It is allowing you to cope with the symptoms of the sickness and the ill that you have. They don't want you cured mentally, physically, or spiritually. They want to give you the tools to cope with your oppression. So therefore, they suppress your ability to see the reality for what it is so that you can maintain a lifestyle of overcoming the obstacles, but never removing it. I want to make you good at being able to do your job in McDonald's, in the field, on the plantation. So I need to create suppressants. All the while, this is where the kicker comes in. Not only am I not curing you, but I am getting you to pay for your dysfunction. Both ways. I catch you coming and going. I Don King you. The more your argument is baited in disassociated trivia and non-constructive trivia, the further away from identification you can go. So again, I never get to a point where now I can really see the enemy for what it is. That enemy is translucent. Maneuver them into weakness. Ripen for the sickle. Before the battle begins, put your opponent in a position of weakness that victory is easy and quick. Create dilemmas where all potential choices are bad. The difference between a choice option, which creates a decision. If I keep my people in the confines of options, but by removing the ability to recognize choice, they will never have a connection to what we call being self-determined. Self-determined doesn't equate. Self-determined is not something that is attractive. Self-determined is not something that I have an appetite for. I want to continue to digest these basic, unnatural, unreal foods, processed lifestyles. Again, physical, mental, spiritual. Even though I'm giving y'all examples that apply to physical diet. The word diet simply means what you take in, okay? You hear two people to use that word wrong all the time. Oh, I'm on a diet. Diet is what you eat. That's all that word means. What you consume. Diet means what I consume. You hear people say this all the time. Oh, something is on sale. Everything in a consumer market is on sale. I use the word on sale as a gimmick to get you to come into the store to buy what is on sale. I raised the price. I put a fake sticker tag on there that said this item was $10. I purposely put a $10 sticker and purposely put a $5 sticker on top of the $10 sticker so that you will peel it back and see that it used to be $10 and feel like you're getting a deal all along, not realizing that it was never $10 in the first place. But I create this illusion of a good deal that you call a sale. Come on, people. We keep manipulating ourselves with everything. Hope I ain't coming too hard, y'all. What is a problem? A problem can be defined as an undesirable situation or condition that hinders the achievement of a goal or desired outcome. It is often a complex issue that requires analysis and understanding, which I would really say overstanding, to identify its root causes. Problems can arise from various sources such as internal processes, external factors, or a combination of both, which they are combinations of both. This is why we have to get out of what we call binary logic. They can be specific or systematic, affecting individuals, organizations, or even societies as a whole. Problems are typically characterized by the persistence and impact on multiple aspects of a situation. They can manifest in varying forms, including conflicts, inefficiencies, errors, or obstacles. Identifying and addressing problems is essential for progress and improvement, as they represent opportunities for change and innovation. Change and innovation is revolution and production. You cannot deal with change and innovation if you are stuck in the cycle of consumption. Remember that. The approach requires right reasoning through scientific analysis, not wrong reasoning, right reasoning. Again, if you want a copy of this document, put your email. If you hadn't already done so, put your email in the chat. Defeat them in detail, divide and conquer, separate the parts and sow dissension and division. Turn a large problem into small, intimating, defeatable parts. That's the point. Divide them and conquer. Defeat them in detail. So here, I'm not going to go over this a whole lot, but what I wanted to do is to provide y'all an attribute chart to help you with critical thinking so that we can get, again, I've exposed y'all to the concept of critical consciousness, but the whole point is to recognize whether I am being a critical thinker or not. So we talk about the attribute, the problem, and the symptom so that you can discern the difference between them. So let me go down to the one at the very bottom real quick. Resolution requires finding a solution or taking appropriate action, period. A symptom, though, can be alleviated or treated to reduce the impact. If I am an oppressive element, my goal is to get in front of the problem and provide you with suppressant solutions, so to speak, as soon as possible. Because as long as I can deal with your emotional attachment or your emotional or the symptoms, so to speak, or what you feel, which creates that pain that gets to the bottom line of a problem. If I can get the symptom, or if I can suppress the symptom before you realize that you need to address the problem, and as long as I can continue to dish that out, and I call it a solution to the problem, and you feel good inside, you feel good in terms of how you view reality, as far as you're concerned, because again, I've provided you options, not a choice, because I suppressed your ability to think out of the box. You think I'm doing good for you. You think I've done this. And not only do you think that I've saved the day and I've saved you, but you're going to pay me every month for those medications that will continue to suppress the problem hide the problem because it is suppressing the symptom. So I'm going to make billions of dollars off of your ignorance. I'm going to make billions of dollars off of your unwillingness to be a producer, unwillingness to be able to step out even into the garden. We got what we call a revolutionary grower's garden, people. For those of y'all that want to learn more about some aspects of self-sufficiency, we got a garden. Go to our websites and our Facebook pages or social media to learn more about that. The point I'm bringing up here is when we refuse to be able to expand upon what it means and the accountability of actually operating from a position of freedom, then we force ourselves to be confined to positions to where we will have to be taken care of. And when we do that, we create a level of domestication simply because we choose to not deal with it. And I'm gonna talk about the top, and then we're gonna move on. But again, this chart, I would urge everyone to want a copy of this document. Definition: the difficulty or challenge that needs to be resolved. But a symptom, when you talk about a problem, but a symptom, an indication or sign of an underlying issue or condition. The indication, see, we too often associate with the indicators. And as long as the indicator is not there in front of me anymore, then we think we resolved something. In this, again, we're talking psychological now. Not, I'm giving examples, talking about the drugs and so forth from a physical standpoint. But remember, physical, mental, spiritual, it all applies. Those trifactors that we started off with in terms of the principle all apply to everything that we're talking about. So the same methodology that they use in warfare, or framework that they use in warfare when they talk about destroying you physically, go into how they destroy you mentally, go into how we are destroyed spiritually. And so therefore, when we talk about a slave society, I don't have to physically oppress you the same way that I did back in the day. I'm still doing it, but I'm not doing it the same way. But because you are tunnel vision fixed on looking for this specific symptom or this specific method, then everything else going on around you on that battlefield that is killing us day by day, all day long, is invisible to you because you looking for it to come this way. And this is our problem. That is our problem. The Hegelian principle. Oppressive revolutionaries and governments have created economic chaos, shortages in food and fuel, compensatory taxation in a crisis, and in education, and the threat of war and other diversions to conditions to the masses. The technique is old as politics itself. This principle of bringing about change in a three-step process, which we call thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is applied on various fronts, but I want y'all to just look at this as it applies to being able to manipulate a population. The first step, thesis, is to create a problem. So, me as the oppressive element, my goal is to create this quote-unquote problem. I manufactured it. Remember earlier we used the word make or made. I made this. So the whole point was I engineered through social engineering, I engineered a problem only because I actually want to introduce you to a solution. The reason I want to introduce you to the solution is because I want to make money off of you. I want to take resources from you. But because you are unaware of the fact that the problem came from me, when I bring forth the solution to the problem that I created and you not know that I created that problem, then I'm going to be the savior. I'm going to be that God. I'm going to be that person of high value and valor and stature. So then the second step is called the antithesis, is to generate opposition to the problem, fear, panic, hysteria. In other words, I dropped the COVID virus. Everybody's in shambles. People start dying. We need something to happen. Here I come with a pharmaceutical to address your needs, because as a population, you need a cure, right? Third step, synthesis, to offer the solution to the problem created in step one. Change which would have been impossible to impose on the people without the proper psychological condition achieved in stage 1 and 2. Applying this principle is used to dismantle social and political awareness by which free men govern themselves, free men, free women govern themselves in order to exterminate the consciousness of self determination. This is the meat of the whole point of what we're getting at. In order to exterminate the consciousness of self determination. So, when I can get a society or a people to not have a consciousness of self determination, then I am able to control them from birth to death. And not only from birth to death, but even in the grave. Because guess what? It costs to put you in the ground. You have to pay to be buried. So I'm going to get you and I'm going to get your next downline because they're going to probably pay for the funeral, so on and so forth anyway. Because of our inability to see self-determination and value freedom, we exchange it for civil liberties. So when we say that, is it by any surprise that we are operating through a slave society? Is it by any surprise that we are dealing with disinformation? Now you have to go back, look at the mirror, reflect, and ask yourself, oh, that's why I'm a slave. That's why I'm not free. That's why things are so hard. So then we got to get to the solution. In cognitive psychology, the term is problem solving. It's used and refers to the mental process to discover, analyze, and dismantle a problem by sorting the parts into workable components that are not able to resolve back into a coherent destructive block. That's the key. When I truly have a solution, then it is not going to be able to go back into a problem forming state. There is a maintenance that is able to stay with me on that level. And so we have to see that for that. That's the difference between a solution and dealing with suppressing or suppressing. The problem solving process involves, number one, discovery of the problem. We've talked earlier about if I cannot identify that target, if I cannot identify that enemy, I'm not going to be able to deal with the problem. So that discovery is key. You can't move to step 2 until you have dealt with step 1. This is where we run into roadblocks, people, because we get introduced to a way to suppress the symptom. And so therefore we never ever really care about the discovery of the problem because we're satisfied with the suppressant. We're satisfied with our liquor. We're satisfied with our weed. We're satisfied with our drugs. We're satisfied with going to the club. We're satisfied with anything that can keep my mind off of the fact that I need to free myself. If I'm unwilling to face that hardcore reality, which is the difference between that slop that you see in the movie Matrix and that nice juicy steak that you see in the false reality. Ignorance is bliss. So when we deal with the bliss of ignorance, I choose. That word choice. I choose to ignore what the problem is. And I'm going to deal with the symptoms because I can deal with the symptoms all day long. Give y'all a perfect example. Within our survival programs, and this is what people don't know, that don't know much about the actual operation of the Black Panther Party and the Panther Party. Our programs, to where we go out and help the community by giving out food, giving out medical supplies, giving out clothes or whatever. Those are called survival programs because you are simply getting by, you're surviving. The idea is that the people get to a position and we bring the consciousness of the people to a position to where we can deal with what we call living programs. This is when the people in the community empowers itself. Living. Survival programs are only suppressants, folks. So if all we do is teach you, is feed you a fish every day for the rest of your life, you are not going to be free. Yeah, you may love us because guess what? Hey, such and such are feeding me. Remember, the Black Panther Party became public enemy number 1 in this country. Public enemy number 1. Not when they carried the guns, But when they operated through the principle of self-determination and and politicize the next generation through the food program, it ain't the fact that they only gave out food to the kids that made them a threat. It is because they politicized the people that they were serving. When we politicize the population, when we do what we're doing right now and provide you with the tools, the resources to grow your mind and elevate your awareness so that you can actually fight the real fight, that is what makes us dangerous, folks. That is what makes you dangerous when you are able to operate on that level. That's what we have to see. I can feed you all day long, but until I change your state, your conditioning, and your awareness, I'm not a threat. So the first thing we have to do, and please people realize that this has to go in this order: discovery of the problem. Next one, decide to tackle the issue. We talked about define, develop, defend. We talked about perception, pursuit, and preservation. The deciding goes into the pursuit. I have to make up my mind and have that willpower that I want to make a change. Going into an acronym of WAR: willing, able, and ready. Another trifecta, people. I can't simply be willing and only willing and think I'm going to make change. A lot of people jump into protest. I feel empowered because I was a part of a protest. You was willing to stand up, but were you able and ready to implement change? It takes all three. We can talk shit, tear up stuff all day long. What are you going to be able to do to replace that foundation that you are destroying? Remember that. If I destroy the oppressive elements of that, the community that is oppressing me, if I destroy them, I have to also come in with a solution. I have to give the people something to land on. I have to give the people a way to manage their life so that they can now begin to live. Okay? Build, destroy. They come together. You don't destroy and not build. You don't build and not destroy. We're talking about basic physics, people. The next one being seeking to understand the problem more fully, which goes into understanding, understanding, and overstanding. And let me break that down. And hopefully y'all are good on the time. Even though it seemed like we got a lot of slides left, I think we'll be able to move through these a little quicker. So y'all just bear with me because we got a lot of stuff we trying to come across to today. So to understand something as a basic example is to be able to know how to drive a motor vehicle. I know how to drive a car. I understand what a car is, how to work a car. Understanding is when that car breaks down, I am able to repair that car. I don't need an outside force to come in and fix it for me. I can fix it myself. Overstand would be I can actually create a car myself. I don't have to go out and purchase your product. I can create it for myself. Now we're talking about power. Power is when you are in the position of production. Because at that point, now somebody has to come to you for that good or that service. That gives you that power. You take that natural raw resource and you develop it and you create something out of it. Alchemy, people, is what we're talking about. Again, from a spiritual warfare standpoint, they strip us of our ability to be able to see toys, tools of your surroundings. When I am unable to take a raw element and through alchemy produced an alternate product that I can then use to create another plethora of products and so on and so forth, because I've been stripped of my way of life, my culture, my entire being, and been domesticated. I am not a producer. I don't know what it means to do this. Therefore, I can only understand. And we think when we're told the word understanding in the school system, oh, I understand that. Oh, hey, Jimmy, over here. Do you understand today's subject matter? Yes. We think we've done something because we understand. People, the word itself, underachieve, underdevelop, understand. We don't realize the language that we use. This is what I'm telling y'all. You are under. You're not inner or over, you're under. Come on. Research available options or solutions. You have to constantly go into that. Again, look at the battlefield, know what you're dealing with, be able to identify these resources and apply them. Number 5, which brings it home, is the kinetic action to resolve an issue. Not just action, kinetic action, people. Within the Black Panther Party and the Panther Party, we have what we call mechanisms. Our mechanisms, we have them broken down in what we call cores. Cores, kinetic, operational, resistance, engagement. We have to have kinetic operation to our resistance in order to engage. This is why our mechanism cycle and when we go into cell theory covers that. Take small bites. Take small bites to play on the people's short attention span. Before they notice, you may acquire an empire. Bam. You keep the people stuck on TikTok in 30-second examples of something. Remember, what I'm doing is when I'm simply throwing it out there, letting you see this. You really think you empowered in 30 seconds. You feel good. You go about the rest of your day. You keep flipping and keep getting hit with 30 seconds of interval. It shortens your attention span. No longer can you even watch a 2-hour video. No longer can you even sit in this class, which is going to be 2 hours, because you want to be able to hear it all in 30 seconds and think you done learned something, and then go out and what? Copy, cut, and paste and send that to somebody and make them feel good. We're not moving. We're not going anywhere. We have to realize that. Kinetic action. Demand complete solutions. Avoid issues by requiring opponents to solve the total problem at hand completely. By placing layers of complexity and ambiguous identifying obstacles that redirect source tensions, you weave a pattern of unrelated elements together that serve to create alternate problems with no eco relationship. That is how I keep you dumbed down as a society. That is how I keep you in a system of oppression. And that is how I keep you from being able to be involved in politics. That is how I keep you from not even liking the concept of political education and realizing that political education is all education. What we're talking about right now, everything is politics. Politics is everything. Everything is governance, whether it be self-governance, family governance, or society governance. It's self-determination, self-sufficiency, it's governance. When you are not attracted to governance, you are not attracted to politics, you are not attracted to solutions, and therefore I can feed you a false reality. And you will spread it for me. Penetrate their minds in communication. Infiltrate the ideas behind the enemy lines. Send messages through little details. Lure people into coming to the conclusion you desire and into thinking they've gotten there by themselves. This is what I mean. We think we done figured something out. They created the problem. We think we came up with the solution, not realizing that all you're dealing with is a suppressant. All you're dealing with is what I threw out there in the first place for you to bite and take the bait. Willie Lynch letter excerpt. Let's make a slave. We will use the same basic principles that we use to break a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors. What we would do with the horse is that we will break them from one form of life to another, transform you into something dumber. That is, we reduce them from their natural state of nature, which means when you were in nature, you knew how to deal with self-preservation. You knew how to sustain yourself. You knew how to create for the sake of survival, for the sake of living. Whereas nature provides them with a natural capacity to take care of their offspring, we will break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create a dependency status so that they will so that we may be able to get from them the useful production of our business and pleasure. Man, if they didn't say that, what is? People sit up here and try to talk bad all day long about the Willie Lynch letter, but you're not taking it in. You're not seeing the application of how this affects everybody, not even just Black people, but an entire population. If you're not one of the 2%, folks, you are a slave. The eyes are useless when the mind is blind. Free your mind and think. Now, this is a guy that I like in terms of some of his information. He's weird, though, I tell you. But y'all can look him up, The Rogue Hypnosis. But this is an excerpt from his book here, How to Manipulate Everyone, Level 1. And this is just level 1 here. I'm going to just roll through this real quick. Cowardless, a domesticated human above all groveling coward, a groveling coward. Behind every perceived act, every recommendation is a veiled threat of sheer brute force if domesticated humans were foolishly yearn for any real freedom. They don't yearn for real freedom. The next aspect of domesticated human being is stupidity. Domesticated human is taught to be only as intelligent as necessary to carry out the allotted tasks in a society hierarchical economy. You think you were taught something. Gullible. Linked to high suggestibility is gullibility. That is placing trust in certain individuals who have done nothing to demonstrate that such trust is deserved or even that same thing to do. Domesticated humans must never be allowed to grow up. You hear that? Never be allowed to grow up, must be treated as children forever. This is known as infantilization. I bet a lot of us have never heard of that before. Hysterical. Most domesticated humans are incapable of rational thought. They process all decision making through their emotions, their current emotional state, as their sole guide to living. They stay domesticated humans. That is to say, domesticated humans are an ongoing pathological trance state. Anxious. From early childhood, most domesticated humans are a low-level state of anxiety. The anxiety makes them miserable and easy to control. Temporary pleasure, a brief absence of anxiety, pain, may be may be awarded to domesticated humans who please those who supply their ability to achieve their most basic means of survival. If they are bad, their anxiety levels can increase easily. Hinduism. Because domesticated humans is like they're almost a constant state of anxiety. They must seek refuge in Hinduistic excess. This relieves them from them for as long as they are absorbed in the Hinduistic pursuit of choice, which we call addiction, sex, so-called recreational drugs, food, alcohol, watching TV, films, excessive playing computer games, etc. You keep them occupied in what we call low-level operations of entertainment. The illusion of power. All domesticated humans believe they have a degree of control over their lives. The fact that they don't, because they abducted their real power to their owners. Domesticated humans have tremendous power, which they never use. This was even written about by Tanakis, which is, we're talking about Greek philosophy now. Faith in priesthood. From ancient times, all humans have been manipulated by those who claim knowledge of the mysteries. That is a body of knowledge only known by the priesthood that must be followed uncritically by the profane for fear of X, Y, and Z. Number 9, scapegoating. All mystery religions require a scapegoat. That is a group of people upon whom all of society's ills can be blamed. What is the heretics believe and who they are irrelevant and constantly changing. It is the arbitrary nature of such domestication which makes the technique so effective. Anxiety is kept high because anyone could be next in line of their chop. Domesticated humans love scapegoating. This allows them to relinquish all sense of personal responsibility. That's what we stated earlier. when you are not aware of what's going on, then what'll happen here is you turn over or you give your power to somebody else. They get to feel superior to others, if only brief. This temporary feeling of feeling good about oneself is highly addictive to people with usually low self-worth. So right now, just so y'all know, for those of y'all that I want to make it be known here that something is going on within the chat to where either we're hacked, or we got somebody that doesn't want this information to get out, and so certain things are happening in the chat.